welcome to the Sober Podcast. I am your host, Jamie Brickhouse, and I'm thrilled to have our sober celebrity guest today, Quinn Stone. Quinn is a digital creator and is here to recover out loud. Thanks for joining us on the Sober Podcast, Quinn.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you providing the space for me to recover out loud.
Yeah. And, a lot of these interviews we do here, we kind of keep it topic focused somewhat. And having, read your amazing bio, which shares so much of your incredible story, I thought how I found my own sober path would be a great topic for today. So,
okay.
You shared in that bio that I was talking about a little bit about where you came from and where you are today. Could you tell us a little bit about that, with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and give you the short version of it. I grew up in Utah. Well, I was born in France, moved to the States when I was just a little kid. We had to learn English. We had nothing but the backpacks on that we came with. Didn't know the language or anything like that. And from a very, very early on, I was bullied. I was a loner. I was sad. I was depressed. I didn't understand what was going on. With my family, there was no stability.
Yeah.
And at about 5, 6 years old, I started getting molested by my neighbor. And which really just added on top of the the confusion and the instability. I don't know if I was too young to express myself, or if the language barrier or whatever it was at that time, maybe I was ashamed and couldn't really articulate properly. But my message wasn't heard when I reached out and was like, this is happening. I wasn't heard.
Yeah.
And I think that along with that, and seeing, I saw another molestation happen with my own eyes, beyond these things, and it was pushed under the table. It wasn't talked about as, oh, everything's okay, nothing, it's none of your business type of thing.
And
so my
look the other way,
kind of thing. Right. So my developing mind at 8 years old, when I have no stability and I have, people expressing their love for me through physical touch, and my mind started being really warped in a negative sense. I thought, oh, this is what we do. This is how we express ourselves, is, we show our friends we love them by touching them. And at a young age, 7 years old, I thought that was acceptable. And so all the neighborhood kids were touching each other. And so we moved from that place. And again, we moved 6 times before I graduated high school. We had moved 6 different times. So I wasn't really ever in the same space for very long. But anyway, so that physical, that the whole idea of me being molested and stuff was troublesome for me in a sense, but not as bad as the idea that I brought that onto somebody else. We were doing it to each other in the neighborhood, and instigating things between us, and that really tormented me, that I did that to somebody else as well.
The guilt.
Guilt. Absolutely. And so that carried with me. And then when I was 15, I was going through, my teenage years and whatnot. And my only stable parent, which was my mother, basically she was like, I can't handle you anymore. I'm going to send you off to live with your dad in France. This guy that I hadn't had any sort of relationship with in years. Never paid child support, barely called me on, I think at that point he'd stopped calling me on my birthdays to even wish me happy birthday. Next thing I know, I'm getting sent off over there. And I get there and he's in the French military, so he was deported for the 9 months out of the year that I was there, which left me stuck at home with his wife, who had 3 kids under the age of like 6 or 7 or something. And she hated me, rightfully so. You know, some random teenager from across the ocean comes to live with a family that you have started with this person and your 3 kids, and now all of a sudden you have a teenager. Like, I get it. But
Wow.
she hated me, and she made life very miserable for me. And so from all of this, you know, I was like, okay, my mom abandoned me. Like, I've never had any stability. I have no like, I have no friends. I have no camaraderie. You know, I'm moving all the time, and I didn't know what a good relationship, a healthy relationship even looked like.
Right.
From
At
a
what point
parent
did
standpoint.
alcohol and drugs come into the picture?
So right when I got home from this 1 year in France,
Hmm.
and I had been searching for this like community and sense of love and acceptance and everything else, I found a bunch of skater kids that were just skating in front of my house. I started hanging out with them, and we started to smoke weed. Um, I don't even really know where the idea came from. Maybe like I think one of my friends' older siblings were smoking or something, and they were like, "You want to try?" And we were like, "Sure, whatever." And it was all fun and games. You know, I was just exploring. I got this dopamine flood from like being somebody other
Yeah.
than myself. You know, like, oh, like I'm funny now. Like I don't have to have social skills. I'm just People just find me funny. And
Right.
you know, I didn't have to try too hard to make friends. And I was like, oh, this is, you know, like I like this feeling. And so I started exploring with other things like ecstasy and cocaine.
Yeah.
um, and then I went through this surgery on my shoulder, and they gave me painkillers. And at that time, I wasn't heavy into substance abuse. You know, I partied and things like that, but nothing like when they prescribed me to Oxycontin for my surgery.
Yeah.
But I was smoking weed. And as I'm smoking weed and I take the Oxycontin, and I'm just so, you know, the dopamine rush is like flooded my brain so much that I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing feeling. I've never felt this like sense of wholeness and like warmth and everything. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I've been chasing.
Yeah.
That false sense of security, you know, like, oh, everything's okay. We kind of get that way when, you know, when we abuse substances, we're like, oh, it doesn't matter if the rent's not paid, or if like, you know, I have an abscess on my arm, like I'll just get high and everything just seems okay. So that's where it really started, was in my teens.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
I want to because I also want to get into the
yeah, I'm sorry, my story
recovery
is
bit.
kind of
No, always an amazing story, everybody's story. So how long did you use before you got in, and what brought you to, let's get to where what brought you to start your journey to recovery?
well, after 18 years of trying every possible way of getting sober, I was at the point where I was contemplating killing 3 people for some heroin.
Mm,
And at this point, you know, I died multiple times, multiple ODs.
yeah.
They gave me 6 months to live back in 2011 because I had done so much damage to my heart that they said, you know, you have a heart of a 90-year-old, you're gonna die in 6 months.
Wow.
Um, and I got to a point, you know, home invasions. My nose has been broken so many times. I've been held up for ransom. I've sold my body. I've helped women sell their bodies. I was just that lifestyle at one point, you know, my brain was like, dude, you're either gonna die or end up in prison. And I had to really ask myself, like, do I want to die? Because I was depressed, and like, sure, a lot of times I did want to die.
Yeah.
But like, I really had to ask myself, do you want to die or do you want to live? That was the bottom line. I was like, you know what? I want to live. I want to live. And something, you know, call it a spiritual awakening or whatever, but something in my brain was like, if you want to live, like the only thing you got to do is just not touch coke or heroin ever again. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just don't look back. And that's, after contemplating killing these 3 people, it just happened to be like a whole, like a, a
A
group of
spiritual
events
awakening.
happened. A group of events happened where I just found myself having the opportunity to actually get sober in a safe place and do it right, and recover at my own speed, with no real obligations. My sister gave me a safe place to recover, and she's like, you don't have to get a job, you don't have to freaking pay rent, you don't have to do anything. Just please come and be alive on my couch for a while so I can stop worrying about you if you're going to die the next day or be in prison. Just like, be here, recover, take the time that you need. And when that opportunity was granted to me after 18 years of having enough of it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and all I gotta do is just never touch coke or heroin again.
Right. Well, we've heard from a few professionals on here about MAT, medical assisted uh, therapy and psychedelic treatment for mental health and addiction.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little about how that has helped you stay sober or been a part of your program along the way?
absolutely. So when I got sober this last time, I'd been on fentanyl, Xanax, and cocaine pretty heavily, and I had done a Suboxone taper before, but wasn't able to get into a clinic because my veins were so shot they weren't able to pull blood work. So I was like, okay, well, I have to get unfortunately, I had to get my Suboxone off the streets, and I had to taper on my own, which I did a 60-day taper. I
Mm-hmm.
took 10 pills, and I, just kept cutting down, cutting down, cutting down until there was nothing left. And then the withdrawals were pretty crappy, but for me, it was getting out of the routine because my brain was so used to the chaos of addiction
Right.
that, like, it wasn't just the substance I was addicted to, it was the lifestyle. It was the constant, like, the rush of getting away with, like, running from the cops or selling an ounce of dope, or, it was all of it.
Right.
And
Right.
so medical assisted treatment, Suboxone, really helped me get out of that addiction loop, that habit loop where I have the cue, I have the reward, and I have the, whatever. Um, for me to get out of that cycle, I had to be like, okay, let me just survive in a space for a while without having to go and pick up, having to do something crazy to get money, or, you know, and once I was out of that habit, like the lifestyle habit, then I could focus more so on the physical habit. And the whole time I've been tapering off Suboxone. So that really worked for me. Um, After getting evaluated in sober living, I found out that I have mental health conditions. Um, I have ADHD
Mm-hmm.
and borderline personality disorder. So they wanted me to be on Lexapro and Xanax for my anxiety, and um, a couple other things. And I was like, man, I'm trying to get sober. I'm not trying to be on a plethora of pharmaceuticals that I wake up every morning and now I'm putting something back into my habit loop that I am dependent on.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I heard Joe Rogan talking about microdosing and mental health just randomly. It's like, let me see what that's about. Because I had experienced a lot with mushrooms previously. And I was like, that doesn't scare me.
Mm-hmm.
Bad trips aren't a thing for me. I know how to, I've been through it so many times. So, like, let me try it out. And so
You
I
know what?
started
We're gonna
microdosing psilocybin.
I'm gonna put you on pause for just a second, and we'll come
Yeah,
back to the rest of this story,
sure.
because this is a great time to stop and say thanks to our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Sonia, the founder of Everbloom. We help you change your relationship with alcohol through connection and conversation. We provide small group meetings where you can share your story and get the encouragement and support you need to achieve your goals. Whatever your goals are, we're a judgment free space. You can find us at joineverbloom.com, BLUME, and try us out with a free meeting.
Back to Quinn Stone. So you were telling
Mhm.
us about microdosing and anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I had heard Joe Rogan talk about it, and I started to look more into it and what the effects were for my specific mental health condition, because I know that it's not conducive for everybody's mental health. Like people with schizophrenia or epilepsy are advised against it. So I had to look for my specific, and it said, these studies that have come out, and studies from even back in the 70s with LSD and everything, that there's huge benefits to the mental health, in the sense that it helps with neuroplasticity. It helps regenerate the neurons, that how they fire it, and not only that, but it gives you like a spiritual awakening to what's really important. And I realized what's really important is that I needed to heal from all the trauma, the molestation, the abandonment, no sense of community and all these things. I had to heal from those things so that I didn't have to run from those things anymore. The reason why I turned to substance abuse is because I didn't feel like I had any stability or anything, no sense of friends, and drugs brought those to me. It wasn't the drugs that I was wanting. It was all those other feelings. I wanted the sense of security. And even though, doing drugs was, chaotic, it was still like this pain that I was causing myself was a controlled pain. Like I had control of at least something, or a sense of control. I didn't have control, but at the same time, it's like, I'm doing this to myself. I feel like I'm in control.
Yeah. Are you in, did you go any of the 12-step routes?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did. So after going to sober living, I was required to go to AA, and I had all this energy of being newly sober. And so I was like, I want to go to every meeting. They required 3 a week. I was like, I want to go to every single one I can.
Yeah.
And just like everything that I do, because of my ADHD, I hyper focus on one single thing, and I'm like, this is my thing. And so I learned the big book front to back. I knew, all the 12 steps and the traditions, and just everything. And once I got to my 12th step, and they mentioned, after completing these steps and having a spiritual awakening, and continue to carry the message to those who still suffer, I was like, what is this spiritual awakening? Because I was thinking that like this is going to be like the Lion King, where Mufasa comes out of the clouds and it's just like, Quinn,
Right.
and that never happened. And I was
dramatic.
like, right. And that never happened. And I was like, what is this spiritual awakening? And to me, that spiritual awakening was like, what's really important? Do you want to live? And having a closer connection with my higher power and what my understanding of that higher power is. Now, after I had completed the 12 steps, and I went on to, what is this spiritual awakening? That's when I started with the microdosing and stuff. And I felt really, really bad. I felt really ashamed that I was trying to get help for my mental health through a substance, and that I would be,
Because you were
looked down on.
as
Right.
the AA program.
Well, besides caffeine and nicotine, but yeah, basically abstinent. So I was like, I'm afraid that people are going to tell me that my recovery, that everything that I've been working for isn't worth anything, because I'm trying to get help for my mental health.
And did that happen?
It did. So I went into a meeting one time, and I had just mentioned, that I wanted to start microdosing because of my mental health, and they were like, you're just looking for relief in a substance. You're just kidding yourself. And I was like, well, so either I'm having to choose between my mental health or my sobriety. And that to me was such a dilemma in my head. Do I choose do I choose living a happy life on a medication where I'm not constantly telling myself that I should kill myself because I'm worthless? Or do I stay sober and not have, be completely abstinent and continue to have these thoughts of like, I'm just a piece of, I'm worthless. Everything's broken and you'll never make it. So
Yeah,
it's like,
suicidal
which one
ideation.
do I choose?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I said, ultimately I want to be happy and I want to live, and everybody's opinion of what my recovery should look like is none of their business. So I'm going to go this route, and I'm going to go with, being happy and being, having to take a substance.
Yeah. And how long ago was
Um,
that?
this was about 2 years ago now.
Yeah. And where are you today in terms of, are you still on microdosing or because you had mentioned, and I totally agree with you, by the way, about
Thank you.
everyone's own recovery. I mean, for me, the 12 steps of program AA has worked for me, and abstinence has worked, but I totally, I've seen enough people to know that your recovery program is personal, and
Right.
also we all have our own issues that may need to be treated, like you said. But where I was going was, you had mentioned that you in your bio, that is, that I read, that you might still be striving for complete abstinence one day, and I was just wondering if that's still a goal or an issue anymore with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do currently still microdose. I used to microdose pretty regularly, once every few days.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more so once a month. Um, and I think that, after completing the steps and being a sponsor, a lot of my sponsees, I'd say probably about 60% of my sponsees would come up, would tell me, hey, are you willing to sponsor somebody who's on Wellbutrin, or who's on Lexapro, or Abilify, or all these other things?
Right.
And of course, I'm going to sponsor those people. And I don't think that those people should be shunned because they're having to take a substance to regulate their mental health conditions. I think it's great that they recognize that they have a mental health condition that needs to be treated. And honestly, to go against their doctor's recommendations, for their own, is probably, not the best idea.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, you know what? If I have to take this because of my mental health regularly, I'd rather be taking a mushroom than taking a pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
But the more that I continue to take it, and the more that I feel better, and more stable and happy, and I've created a life that I don't want to escape from, the less and less I really am inclined to want to take those things. And I don't take them when I want to. I just take them. I take them on a scheduled time. And
Almost as medically prescribed, as if they were
right,
prescribed. Yeah.
right. And just like anything, I think that I think addiction is really about substance abuse. I don't think anybody should go out and do heroin or coke or meth or anything like that. But I think if you're on a medication, it's prescribed, or it's to help you. You know, some people who have Parkinson's take psilocybin and they
Right.
stop shaking
Mm-hmm.
within minutes. And I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
And if that person was in recovery, I wouldn't say, hey, you're no longer sober because you're doing something to stop your Parkinson's. Like, you're doing something to live a happier life. We eat food, we drink water, we have a Coca-Cola sometimes. Some people smoke cigarettes, some people smoke weed. It's what is really, how are you going to live a life without overindulgence? Like, substance abuse is where the obsession comes in. I didn't have a problem with microdosing because my obsession wasn't in trying to escape or trying to numb or trying to be somebody outside of myself.
It was to treat, right?
It was what?
It was to treat yourself, to treat
Right.
the condition.
Absolutely.
One last question. What is the best lesson you've learned in recovery, and how did it help you?
The best lesson I learned in recovery was, for me, my addiction was never about the substance itself. It was about my obsession for the need to escape who I was because I didn't love myself, or the need to numb because I wanted to forget the molestation, or the need to mask because I felt like I wasn't funny enough or good looking enough. So, to me, and this is only for me, I can't really speak for anybody else.
Sure.
My addiction wasn't so much to the substance themselves, outside of the physical addiction, wasn't so much to the substance themselves, was more about what those substances were making me feel, or they were bringing me. I was a drug dealer and stuff. So I'm like, oh, selling drugs will bring people to me. And that was my way of like getting that false sense of camaraderie. Substances always used a purpose for my obsession, which the obsession was validation, acceptance, you know, being numb, whatever it was.
Great. Well, I'm glad recovery brought you here today. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story and your personal journey. Thank you, everyone, for your continued support. You can visit us on www.soberpodcast.com and all places that you find podcasts. You can leave us a review, sign up for our mailing list. You will also find the contact information in the show notes and social media handles for our guest, Quinn Stone. And I'm your host, Jamie Brickhouse. You can find me on TikTok at Jamie_Brickhouse, where I tell a true story in high heels every day. Signing out for Sober Podcast. Tune in for another show next week. Have a good week, everybody.